Hi, everybody. This is the very first podcast that I'm sharing with Nick Knoth, and we're about to tell you about the COMO Vanguard podcast, which is in its brand new form. Nick, thank you for asking me to come along on this ride.
Well, David, I should say, I'm joined here by David Lile, if that wasn't obvious from his voice, that we're also familiar with here in Columbia and in Missouri. I appreciate you being willing to jump off this cliff with me, and hopefully it goes well. I'm sure folks are wondering what is Como Vanguard and what is this Como Vanguard podcast, and we'll go ahead and dive right into that.
Please do, because I'm going to be learning some things along with the listeners. And so I'm here to kind of learn that. I'm aware of your Vanguard, Como Vanguard, and I think you do a terrific job. I wanted to say printed, but nothing is printed anymore. It's been posted online as a written document. What have you tried to do with that? And what are you happy about with what's happened over the years that you've gone with that?
Yeah, so Yokomo Vanguard, like life itself, has had its iterations and starts and stops. Some folks are aware that this originally started in the fall of 2022, went on for a while. Then I had to bring it to an end. Then we brought it back in 2024 for a little bit. Then we had to bring it to an end again, and we brought it back this past spring or early summer of 25. And really, the one thing that never changed was kind of the dream and purpose of Como Vanguard was to provide, consistent, reliable coverage for local politics and policymaking is how I like to describe it. And really what that looks like is we're talking about city council for the city of Columbia, their meetings, their decisions, and the things related to that.
And I think that you found that there was a dearth of information that was coming out through traditional media because they're limited on time, they're limited on other circumstances that keep them from going as much in depth as you have. Have you The feedback has had to be good, or else you wouldn't be continuing this. But what is your overall sense of how much you have accomplished what you want to accomplish up to this point?
Yeah, well, just to take that first part with the feedback, I certainly would not have brought it back twice if it was not for folks asking me to or being, disappointed when I had to what turned out to be temporarily pause it for a spell because of things going on in my own life, and this takes time and effort. So the demand is there, and I think that is, I'm not going to say I think the demand is there because Como Vanguard is so great and amazing. I think it's also because there is nobody filling that void, right? Because to be honest, right? If you look at the Columbia Daily Tribune, it's kind of a shell of its former self, almost literally, in that they have one dedicated reporter who covers all things Columbia, Boone County, and beyond, and that gentleman's doing his best, but that's one person. And then you've got the student education segments, right? Whether it's the Missourian or KMOU or whomever, and they're serving their purpose, but none of them are filling this void of covering city council for Columbia consistently, reliably, and also with the context of, a decision was made tonight in a council meeting, but what does that mean and how is that connected to the history of that issue in Columbia? Because a lot of these are students who are learning and doing their best, and I have no issue with them, and I love them, and I love that they do it, but they have no history here in terms of understanding, okay, well, there was a contentious short-term rental vote tonight for a permit. Well, were they here for the last 5 to 8 years when that was a heated debate and how we got to this point and why tonight's vote is symbolic of other things, right? And so I think those two things in terms of the void being there and the quality of what we're trying to bring in terms of being objective, delivering information and not opinion, I think is sorely missed nowadays.
We kind of have an outline of what we want to talk about during this initial podcast. And so I think we will flesh out more of those ideas in a moment. But I want us to address what are your hopes for adding a podcast to what you are doing now?
Yes, it's kind of a cliche nowadays, right? Everybody has a podcast. Everyone and their
Yeah.
mom has a podcast. And I was very reluctant to add this component, but I came to appreciate the reason for doing so, which is to answer your question, to add some additional color to what is a very black and white report that Como Vanguard puts out.
Yeah.
Como Vanguard, the city council reports, for those who have or have not seen them, delivers, it's partially quasi minutes, right, of what happened at the council meeting in a sense, and then key takeaways, the things that were approved, things that were denied, things coming soon, etc. And we do our best to provide context and analysis in a very brief and digestible format,
Mhm.
but that requires us to leave out color. and some context. And so I'm hoping that this podcast can serve as that vehicle for adding additional color and context. And as we'll talk about in a moment, bring in opinions other than those who are always contributing to Como Vanguard.
Yeah. I'm going to throw out the name Mark Farnan because
Hmm.
some people are going to know that Mark Farnan used to cover council meetings, sometimes planning and zoning, but he was really good and he has passed away. So
Hmm.
he left a void there. I see you filling that void. I see you also bringing some personality to it that helps people understand some of the background of why people make decisions, maybe, and
Hmm.
what those decisions mean. We are starting this, but let's talk the logistics, timing, when podcast will come out, what your plan is as far as offering these oral responses to what the city does.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, Como Vanguard shoots for consistency in what we deliver. And so the podcast is going to shoot for that same consistency. Our plan for now, and this might change because this is kind of a living, breathing document, so to speak. David and I might adapt the format. We might adapt the pacing of it and the timing of it. But for now, our plan is to produce and release a episode of this podcast every time there's a city council meeting. Just like we produce a written report every city council meeting, we'll do a podcast. And the goal there is to take the report that Como Vanguard produces and really use that as the material for the podcast in terms of let's talk about this report and what it actually means and add that color that we were talking about. And so you're looking at about 2 episodes a month. Council meetings are on Mondays, the first and third Mondays of the month generally, which means for us, David and I would record the podcast maybe on the Tuesday, so the day after. We release that episode on Wednesday, the day after that, to the Como Vanguard subscribers, and then soon thereafter, with a little bit of a delay, to the quote unquote general public, general audience, whether that is folks who are listening through their Apple podcasts or Spotify or whatever it might be.
Yeah. You hinted about this a few moments ago, but then it's not just going to be your voice. It's not just going to be my voice. Your dreams of including another person or persons. It could
Mhm.
be more than one person sometimes, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the goal there and the idea is for us to be joined as regularly as possible by a rotating third guest co-host. And I say co-host because we are not looking to have someone on, say the mayor of Columbia, them be the subject of the episode. We want the third co-host who joins us to be a host with us, to contribute their opinion, their perspective to what we're talking about, and be a part of the discussion and the commentary, not the subject of it.
Yeah, I like that a lot, and it's the content, and again, I just picked up a word that you just said, but it's the content, not the personality, that's going to be important. I like that a lot, and it will be, the perspective will be different than what you would bring to this, than what I would bring to this, but it would be a perspective that can meld together and have a conversation between 3 people and somewhere down the road, I don't know what this will evolve into, but it could evolve into more than one person. Now,
Mhm.
how are you going to decide, or how will we decide what will be the subject? What will be the focus of that particular thing? I think, my guess would be what was on the agenda of the city council, what is happening beyond the agenda, and it could go several different ways in regard to what the person who comes or what we discuss, if it's just the two of us, as the subject of that podcast.
Yeah, I think, there's going to be a lot of factors coming into play to your point. Part of it's going to be what does city council do the night before? But it's also going to be not being ignorant to the things that are happening in our community that are relevant to city council, but are not happening at a city council meeting, right? And again, to your point, also being dependent on who is that third co-host, right?
Right.
If it's a downtown business owner, they're going to have a perspective we want to hear on downtown public safety that would be different than maybe, okay, let's have the, Betsy Peters, a sixth ward council person in, right?
Mhm.
We want their perspective, whoever they are, not only on the issues of the night and of that day, but on the issues that are of concern to Columbia.
Yeah. I know from an outsider, as an insider, either on the council or reporting on the council more heavily than I ever have, that not all council meetings are created equally.
No, not at all. My first thought is always when you say that is some council meetings are an hour, some council
Yeah.
meetings are 12 hours.
That's true.
Yeah.
I mean, people get in their mind, "Oh my gosh, it's a city council meeting. That thing's gonna go forever." But if you look at what you write in the COMO Vanguard and then also how other things are covered, you can see that some of them get done pretty quickly. But, I mean, it's
Yes,
just
yeah.
what the subject is, and it's the time of year as well as what is happening at that particular in the what the city is focused on right then.
Exactly, and, I always tell folks, even though as someone myself who dreads a long council meeting as much as anyone else, and trust me, anybody who attends council meetings dreads a long council meeting, uh, they are a necessity. You cannot get around it if you wanna have public input and a robust debate on certain subjects.
I want to say also that there are certain subjects that people talk about at their home, when they go out for coffee, at their business places. But some of the things that are not talked about in regard to property or development, that becomes just as important, but it is not sometimes the chief subject compared to safety downtown or traffic or garbage collection.
Mhm.
And so I think hopefully there's a way to engage people and say these subjects are important also because they determine what the community will look like in the future.
Oh, 100%, and to your point, there are subjects that dominate the dinner table discussions, the news cycle. Right now, certainly the past couple of months, public safety, right, has been the heated topic in Colombia for a lot of reasons. But that doesn't mean at the same time that we're still not dealing with a housing crisis, that
Mhm.
we don't have infrastructure issues, right? All these things exist simultaneously. They're not mutually exclusive. We just get focused in on one or two of them at a time because that's just, that's the news cycle to an
Mhm.
extent. And also that's the human brain. That's how we all operate.
You shared with me like some of the methodology of doing this particular podcast. You could focus on major motions, which we're talking about, votes, which again is clear, amendments. There are sometimes amendments made to the budget that I don't, I know they're there. I just don't click on those. But I think it's good to have somebody saying, okay, this is something that we should pay attention to. I like also public comment themes because I do like to check what the public comments at the first of the meeting. You can ask to be one of the speakers right at the first
Right.
of the meeting. But then at the end of the meeting, when it's opened up for other people just to make general comments, not only from the public, but also the city council persons give a direction that they want to see the city take a focus on. So I like that also. And then also the strategic dynamics, whatever that might mean. But I think that that is a wide open explanation of saying, what's happening here? Who's moving this? And for what reason are they doing this? May not be on the agenda, may not be something that's going to be decided within the next month or half month, but it's kind of underneath the surface.
Yes, yeah, I included the strategic dynamics theme, which, as you noted, kind of a broad, vague description, right?
Yeah.
And that was purposeful because in my mindset that includes, what's the political undercurrents that are influencing things? And I say, and when we look at politics in City Hall, it's not just the 7 elected officials on the dais. Politics is pervasive in life. And so there's staff politics. There's the politics of the logistics of a council meeting. There's the logistics in general of if you want, department A to get something done, this is what the timing of that looks like. So it's not going to happen until X, Y, or Z time. Right. So all of these dynamics play into these things not that would not be obvious to a lot of folks, including myself, unless you really know what to look for.
Which leads me to ask you this. I know you've had experience. I know you're a quick thinker, sharp thinker, but how do you pinpoint what the hidden contradictions are or the coalitions or alliances that are made and what is really happening that motivates certain individuals to do or not do certain things?
I'd say it's half of what happens inside the council chamber and half of what happens outside the council chamber.
So how do you keep a hand on what's happening outside there?
I'm a good listener, and I like to have meetings with folks that includes anyone. It's members of our community, nonprofit leaders, just folks who live here who have a concern and a voice, and they're not afraid to use it. I make a point of listening to people and being proactive in meeting with folks, whether they're retirees like yourself who are invested in our community and have an opinion, or they're my council person. Right? I meet with folks, I listen, and I try to do my best to ask questions that I don't think people are asking because I feel like most questions are the same questions everyone is asking,
Hmm.
whether it's reporters or individual such as myself. And that just takes effort to think, well, what are we missing here? Right. Going back to that strategic dynamic concept of what are the undercurrents that I'm not thinking of? And sometimes asking that question, what am I missing?
I want to clarify an idea or an approach that I have, and you can say you agree or disagree, but I'm not into, I guess it's called, and I'm an old guy that doesn't use social media, but clickbait, doing things just to get attention. I think what I would like to participate in, and I think you would also, or I probably wouldn't be sitting here talking to you, and that is not the wild accusations or conspiracy ideas, but just what is really going on. How do you interpret that? What do you think that it means in the long term? And we'll go from there. Not everything is going to be the most exciting, wildly dynamic type thing. It's
Right.
just like, oh, this is what really happens, folks, and
Yeah.
this is what's going to impact you in the future. You may not see it now, but it will impact not you, but your kids or the community itself.
Yeah, that's certainly the philosophy that we've tried to bring the Tacoma Vanguard, and you and I know are in sync and bringing to this podcast and this show of really having a commitment to accuracy, to providing context and transparency to folks, including when we have, perhaps our own obligations or what's the word I'm looking for?
You mean individually, like you and I,
Yeah,
or
individually or just,
our
uh
own biases
our own biases,
and
thank you. That's
expectations
the
of
word I
certain
was
things?
looking for.
Yeah.
There's certainly things like that, and just part of it, I think, is going to be successful because, as we'll get touch on a little bit here shortly, is that I think we both want this show to be engaged with the listeners, and for them to have a voice in what is of concern. What are you and I missing when we have a
Mhm.
conversation? We're not operating in a silo when we don't want to.
Right. Indeed. With that in mind, I think you're leading to something that I was getting ready to ask you anyway. You've got your COMO Vanguard, which is online. Is that where you expect people to give you feedback?
Yes. So, the podcast will be published where all podcasts are published. It doesn't matter where you listen, it'll be there. But for Como Vanguard as a whole, right, we have our Substack through the Substack website. That's where we publish the written reports. That's to where we will first publish this podcast. But we're also going to have available for a lot of reasons, a place for folks to submit really kind of a Q&A
Yeah.
to us. And maybe not a question, but just if you have a comment, if you have a concern, and you're listening to this, we're going to have that open. It's going to stay open, and we're going to do our best to address. I mean, an ideal world, all of them. We're keeping them in mind, right? I've always been very, very straightforward and have sought out with the written reports, having feedback from my readers. You've provided me feedback in the past. I've had readers who continue to, and that has played, I think, a significant role in what I perceive as the quality of the reporting. Knowing what people want and need is important. And so the same will apply to this show in that you don't have to have a question, but if you have a comment, if you have a concern, don't hesitate to communicate with us through the Q&A, and we'll have a link out there on the Substack. But you can also reach out to us. Some folks listening, I'm sure, will have ways of contacting you or I individually. I'm sure that's welcomed as well. And we're all ears. I don't want us, again, going back to, I don't want this to be a silo where it's just David and I saying things and that's how it is, period. We want to be engaged. We want this kind of be ideally almost like a community effort of like, this is community radio in a sense of what we're trying to do in covering city council.
Commercial free, not beholden to any strict time frame or
Yes,
anything like that.
no ads, no clickbait to your point, no outside influence. This is as independent as we could possibly make it.
So this is episode 0. What do you want to say about episode 1?
So episode 1 will start, really the inaugural episode for the Como Vanguard podcast will start in tandem with the first meeting of the city council in 2026, which is January 5th is that city council meeting. And so in theory and likely in practice, we will record our first episode on January 6th, perhaps with a third co-host if we can line one up. And then we will begin that routine of 2 episodes a month in tandem with city council meetings and see where things go.
You have written a purpose for this podcast. If you would read that or let me read that, one of the two. I think that it's a good one, and I think it summarizes well what you're trying to accomplish.
I'll let you take it.
Well, it says city council decisions shape Columbia's future. Our goal is to provide the clearest, most grounded analysis available to the community so they can understand not just what happened, but why it matters.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, we'll see how we do that.
That's the goal. That's the
I'm
goal.
excited about the journey.
Me too, David. I really appreciate your willingness to walk it with me.
We'll see. We'll see how well an old retired guy can walk.